me go? Okay. Call to order the zoning committee meeting for April 9th, 2018. The first thing on the agenda is an update of the town's implemental comprehensive plan by the town planning consultant, Jim Pashek. Jim?
Thank you very much. This is the first of a number of council updates. As we go through this planning process, we have a number planned, and we look forward to coming back to you and bringing you up to date so that you know how the progress is going. As many of you know, this project really started at Community Day on September 9th, 2017, where we had a booth and we collected people's opinions about what they liked about Mccandless and what they thought might be improved. During the fall, you solicited people for the steering committee, and we ended up with an amazingly wonderful group of 18 people. They're really sharp and very, very helpful in terms of helping us understand the community better. And I'd just like to thank Ms. Zachary, Mr. McKim, and Mr. Mertz for being on that committee. It's a great committee, I think you'll agree. In January through March 16th, we worked with the questionnaire. We sent out to every resident a postcard with the link for the survey, and we closed the survey on the 16th. We had about 1,750 responses to the questionnaire, which included, that does not include about 218 invalid submissions. So that 1,750 is the valid submissions, which based on our responses to the questionnaire represents about 5,600 people in the community, or about 20% of the population, which is an excellent response rate for the questionnaire. So you'll be getting a complete analysis of that questionnaire and all the information in the next month or so. On January 30th, we had a public meeting. For those of you that attended, do you remember the brown paper up on the walls and the yellow sticky notes? But the community came and talked to us about what they thought was challenging and was great about the community. And there was a lot of great things about Mccandless, the town of Mccandless. We reviewed the last comp plan for recommendations and came up with a list of what hadn't been completed along with a planning study for the Harmony Trail, so we could kind of catch up on what's been planned in the past. And we toured the community with staff to just become more familiar with Mccandless. We've interviewed more than 20 people suggested by the committee. These represented residents, business people, developers, and heads of nonprofits, including our largest institutions in Mccandless. They were very generous with their time in talking to us in the interviews. And recently, we've started to try and develop some pop-up events. You may have heard some of this. I'd like to just thank Dewana Alfonsi, Deb Sagan, Renee Weibel, and Nicole Hansen, who have staffed some of these pop-up events. They've had a great one at the library where they asked people to talk about what they liked about the community and what could be improved. We're talking about having some events at the CCAC as well as some of the grocery stores. So these are all things that were ideas generated by the steering committee, and I applaud them for the effort they're putting in to get everyone, as many people as we can, to talk to us about what their aspirations are for the community. We met as a steering committee on March 8th and April 2nd, and we plan to meet again in May to come to some conclusions about what are some of the key issues in the community. And we have tentatively scheduled our second public meeting for June. We're talking about June 19th. The steering committee, again, came up with some great ideas. Ice cream won over barbecue, Steve. But we might have an ice cream social as a way to kind of gather people and get them to come in. I think it's a great idea. And have them talk about some of the things that the community has been telling us through all these wide range of public inputs. And so that'll hopefully happen in June. You've asked us to kind of have a public input section of this plan, which is called Phase 1, and that'll be done probably in June or July. We'll jump right into the Phase 2 part, which is starting to develop greater detail and information about best practices about the key issues, and we hope to run through that in the summer and fall of 2018. So with that brief update, I wondered if I could answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from council? Any questions from the public? No questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is a discussion of a request from Seavest Health Care Properties LLC, which has been reviewed by the Planning Commission for an amendment to the town's zoning code to allow a small format hospital within McKnight Road Development District. This request proposes to modify the resource protection section of the development ordinance to allow the substitution of off-site land on a 2-to-1 ratio with no less than 2 acres substituted. For resource protection land, which would have been altered for this project, the small format hospital is to be located near the corner of the west side of McKnight Road and the south side of Duncan Avenue. So it's a corner across from, I think it's across from the drugstore. Does anyone want?
I'll start.
Okay.
The purpose of this meeting is to give council some information as to whether or not this proposal should move forward. This proposal originated from Seavest. It didn't originate through the town. And we wanted to give council an update and have a little bit of a discussion about the plan. We extensively reviewed this at the Planning Commission. Planning Commission made some recommendations to help clarify the ordinance. If this goes forward, the town attorney and staff will have to go through the ordinance and rewrite it into town format so that we could send it to the county. After a 45-day review period by the county, we can then have a public hearing on it. So Council Member Wakauskas indicated generally what the proposal is for. At this point, I'll turn it over to Dusty Kirk, who can give an update or a brief explanation as to what this is. If this goes forward, there will be a public hearing discussing this in great detail.
Thank you, Bruce. Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Dusty Elias Kirk. I'm an attorney with Reed Smith. I'm representing Seavest Healthcare Properties. And what we're asking is a text amendment that would permit a small format hospital in your D development district. So the small format hospital is, did you, Bruce, give them the packet?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't know if you have this in front of you, but they have the ordinance. They do not have the packet. Okay. A small format hospital is, one second till I get to the right page. We had submitted a plan like this that went to your planning commission. It's an independently licensed hospital, and it is a center that will accept Medicare and Medicaid, and it's accredited hospital by the state. It is approximately 20,000 to 30,000 square feet. It has 8 ER beds. That's what we're proposing, and 8 to 10 hospital beds. So that's why it's a small format hospital. In this case, this hospital will also be taxable because it's not going to be owned and operated by a nonprofit. It will be operated by a hospital but owned by a profit entity. So it will be staffed with 24/7 with board-certified, board-eligible ER physicians and hospitalists, and it'll have on-site X-ray, CT, ultrasound, and lab service agreements. So that is what a small format hospital is. It will also have some medical offices, but it will be to treat those patients who come there who need ER, treatment right then. That's the whole point of it. It is so that people can be treated where they live rather than having to travel so far to go find an ER in another community. That's the whole purpose of it. So what we did is we had a long presentation to your planning commission, and we explained that it would be a facility that would be 20 to 30,000 square feet, that it would have a height, we needed an additional 5 feet. Because it's a hospital, each of the floors are 15 to 16 feet, and this is 4 floors because of all the technical equipment and medical equipment that has to be in the building. So that is one request that's in this text amendment, is for an additional 5 feet from your existing ordinance. Also, the site is, you're probably familiar with it. It is directly across from the CVS, and it is a difficult site to develop. So the changes that we have requested are for the young woodlands and for the steep slope, and we are going to provide essentially in this text amendment double the amount of conservation easement than was in your existing ordinance. We can provide the engineers here. Where did he go? He has some drawings if you want to see what that would look like. But that's basically the sum of what we were proposing to you.
Dusty, I'm really concerned about our resource protection land, especially the part that's on the west side of Duncan Avenue and Mccandless Crossing West. There are barriers that separate the neighborhoods from Mccandless Crossing, and I did massage your language somewhat, and I could provide it to you after this meeting, or if you're leaving after this.
No, we'll stay, or I can get it from Bruce.
Okay.
But I think we adopted the
Yeah.
language that you suggested.
Well, you modified my language, and I'm just it's just adding some more stuff to it.
Oh, you're adding more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, I wanted to, well, it's a real technicality, but I'll give it to Bruce, and well, Bruce has the language.
Yeah, if I could, just to help clarify what Councilmember McCloskis is trying to do is protect existing resource protection land, especially that on the west side. So he's come up with language that he believes will protect that, and we want to try to incorporate that into the ordinance. When this goes forward, we're going to have to rewrite it anyways. Again, town attorney and administrative staff are going to have to rewrite it and send it to the county in nearly a final format. So we have to get it into our format in order to do that.
I don't think she'll have any objection to the language.
And as part of that, we'll try to work your language into that and give it to Dusty.
Oh, okay. So
What is the?
Yeah. Pardon?
What is the additional language?
Well, the additional language. If you want to go through this whole thing, it'll take only a few minutes. On your first page, you have section 131402B5. This isn't anything to do with resource protection land, but the third line up, you have and allow. I would put and allow institutional uses, because all institutional uses aren't permitted in this.
In the D district?
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Okay.
And the language on page 2 is under the D, the cap D, which you added, okay?
On page 2 under cap D, okay.
Yeah, cap D. Second line, applicable to, or, I would put, or in any way affect existing, any way affect, just add that language. And then at the end of where it says protection land areas, or to any resource protection land designated as such under its existing land development plans, such as the area, and then I have parcel number 715-F-55, containing approximately 15.21 acres, and then I have within the Mccandless Crossing West, to the west of Duncan Avenue, below Ridgemont Road and Haw Drive. And I understand it's pretty specific, but I thought that maybe could go in a whereas clause in the ordinance or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's more likely we would use a recital to kind of explain the reason for those clarifications, but I think to keep it more manageable, I think we'd probably use just the original portion of the language that we just discussed without the example in the text.
Right, with the example.
So I guess to understand what you're doing, you're just trying to not have it apply to parcels that have already been developed, is that correct?
Right, exactly what your language says, but I want to make sure it's
Right.
inclusive.
Okay.
And the same change would be made in 6 on page 3. You have the same,
And 1326,
13, 14,
oh, I see.
03E,
And
6.
6, yeah, I understand, yes.
Okay, the same language would be there.
Okay. We don't have a problem with any of
No, I
that.
don't think you would.
No, we do not. So the whole point is to provide protection for the resource conservation area. That's what,
acts as a buffer.
that's what this was.
Yeah, that
Yes.
acts as a buffer area between the development and the neighborhoods.
Right, and we're adding the definition of the small format hospital, which wasn't in your zoning code as of right now. And in fact, it is like a new concept in Pennsylvania, so,
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions or concerns?
Any questions from council?
Yes, I have a small one. Why so close to Passman? I mean, if you were looking for a place where people can get to a hospital quicker, I would think.
Well, some patients will not be able to use Passivant, depending on their insurance.
Okay, so it's this new insurance war that's doing this. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment. Due to the potential conflict of interest, I'm recusing myself of all discussion and voting in regard to CVest Healthcare Properties due to my employment with Allegheny Health Network.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, I am in no way related to Ms. Kirk.
That is correct.
Although we've been associated in the past on some assessment issues a long time ago.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of build off of Bruce's introduction to where we are in the process. So, just to clarify, council has the discretion as to whether or not to consider both this zoning amendment that's been submitted by CVest and then the next item on the agenda submitted on behalf of Sheets. So where we are now is council. It's going to be up to council to determine, all right, does this make sense for the town? And then at the voting meeting on April 23rd, you'll have an opportunity to say, yes, we'd like to go ahead, start the process to get this amendment set up for a public hearing so that we can have further discussion and vote on it. So you don't have to make, number one, you're not approving the actual development that was described. This is just an amendment to the code. And number two, there will be further opportunity to discuss the specifics of this ordinance, at the public hearing. But as Bruce said, we want to try to have it in as final form as possible, which is why we'll coordinate with Attorney Kirk before we submit to the county. Because if you do make changes after that county submission that are material, you have to start the process over again and to go through a new public hearing and a new review period. So that's what's, that's where things stand right now for council. And again, you'll have an opportunity to actually vote whether to move forward or whether to determine that it's not a good fit for the town at the April 23rd meeting.
Did you comment on the 45-day county period of review?
I think Bruce covered that, but yeah, that's why this is kind of a cumbersome process a little bit, because the county planning department does have an opportunity to review every single zoning amendment that's considered by any municipality in the county, and they provide comments that are more, you don't have to make changes based on the comments, but you do have to give them the opportunity to comment.
Mr. Markowskis, I have a short question. May I proceed with it? Ms. Kirk, Attorney Kirk, I don't think you have to get up for this thing. Are there other, I read the ordinance and the description of what these small format hospitals are. Are there other small format hospitals that have been established in our area? Where would the closest one be, for example?
This will be the first one. This will be the first one in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
There are small format hospitals in Nevada, Texas, California, is that right? Oklahoma. Yeah, mostly in the western half of the U.S. This is the first small format hospital being proposed. And we're proposing some in other jurisdictions here in Allegheny County and western PA, but there aren't any yet.
It's probably almost self-evident, but what does the descriptive term small format mean? Just mean a smaller or scaled back hospital? Is that all it really is trying to say?
It's not a trauma center, so and I can have someone who is more of an expert on this explain that to you.
Good evening, my name is David Goldberg, for the record. So a small format hospitals, as Dusty explained, it's a small area space, so 20 to 30,000 square feet, which has inpatient beds, an emergency room, inpatient capabilities, CT, ultrasound, point-of-care testing lab, everything you would need in a smaller format hospital. It does not have the larger programming that you would have in a hospital that's 100, 200 beds in general. So it's very focused, very small, and it's part of a continuum of care that allows it to be part of different health systems that they partner with, so we don't overbuild, overdevelop, and inundate communities with more than they need, and keep it focused. So you have a patient who would come in, would be taken care of in the ER and could stay 2 to 3 days in those medical beds. Inpatient beds are on observation status. They would be taken care of, and if they can be, they would be treated and released and or transferred for higher level service of care if they need extensive surgery or more complicated admission.
I think you just answered another question I had. Did you say are serious surgical procedures conducted at this small
No.
format? They'd be referred somewhere else?
Yes.
Okay.
Where would they be referred to?
The closest hospital that this hospital would have what's called a transfer agreement. You have to have those in place to transfer a patient for the next level of care. It could be to Passivant, it could be downtown. It depends where the patient would want to go. If they have a cardiologist in a particular system hospital and it's not an urgent emergent situation but transfer for that level of care, they would follow the pathway based on their need and what the doctors would prescribe. Each of these hospitals have what are called hospitalists. You may have heard that before. So we'll have either what we call an internal medicine physician or what we call an advanced practice professional, physician assistant, nurse practitioner, partnering with that physician to take care of them while they're admitted in the hospital, if they are admitted. The majority of the patients who present at these hospitals, based on our national scale, about 92% of the patients are what we call treated and released, meaning they don't need admission. The other 8% that might need admission might need children's care, behavioral health care, significant surgical, and they would go on. It's a very small percentage, but that's the makeup of that balance of 8%. We will not have helicopter service at this particular site. Most, because of our proximity to the area hospitals, would be ground transport. And the way this particularly works is we use the local systems, transport systems, rather than burdening EMS. It would be built in for transfer within privately contracted transport, and in an emergency situation, then we would use EMS.
Thank you.
Surely. Any other questions?
Mr.
we're basically just familiarizing ourselves with this tonight. We're not making any kind of decision.
That's
Right.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and what I'm passing around is some of the pictures of which we gave to Planning Commission and some of the explanation about what a small format hospital is, and it's some of the things that Mr. Goldberg just told you. So, and it's under tab 1. Tab 2, we're changing based on the information that your Planning Commission and Greg has requested.
Mr. Chairman, one question. On this proposed development ordinance, these changes, are these site and project specific, or would this apply to all of the development zoning going forward?
I think it applies to all of it, which would not include the existing ones. Is that your take on
Yeah, I
it?
mean, it will apply to the development district, however, there's, the area that's already subject to the conditional use approval would need to continue to comply with the terms of that approval.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions, any other questions from council? Any questions from the public? Okay, we'll move on to the next one, thank you. Review a request from Sheets, Inc., which has been reviewed by the Planning Commission for an amendment to the conditional use standards for a service station within the residential commercial RC zone district, which would amend the spacing requirement for a service station in an RC zone district to correspond to the spacing requirement in the C3 zone district. This would allow 2 service stations to be located at a signalized intersection within the RC zone district. So currently, there's a 1,500-foot requirement for an RC district. For a gas station can't be within 1,500 foot of another gas station. So, do you want to take us from, or do you want me to?
You're doing a good job.
No, I just want to. I got some questions asked, but go ahead.
It's very unusual that we get a zoning amendment that's proposed by a third party. Tonight, we have 2 of them. So, for the people that didn't hear the explanation before, the purpose of this meeting is to explain to council what this proposed text amendment is. And this one is being proposed by Sheets, and it's for a gas station / service station. And the procedure will be, as was explained earlier, that council will vote on this at the next business meeting to see if this advances. But this is to just give at least an introduction to council. If it goes through, there will be a detailed public hearing at a later date. We will rewrite this in town format and send it to Allegheny County for review and schedule the public hearing. So,
And the date of the next business meeting is April 23rd.
yeah, that will be the date that we vote, that council votes to proceed. So at this point,
Is that the date that we vote to make the amendment or not?
no,
make it?
it's only to vote to proceed with the public hearing. It's not even a public hearing, it's council will make the decision at that point as to whether to go ahead with a public hearing.
But we don't vote on this ordinance?
No.
At that date?
Nope,
At that
there will
date.
be
Authorize its preparation.
Okay.
There will be substantive discussion and detailed discussion. Again, this one was reviewed at the Planning Commission in detail, and they recommended a minor change, and in fact, I think we already understood the change. We added signalized intersection to the ordinance, and but this is much simpler than a much more simple modification, and it is almost the exact same thing as what we have in our C3 ordinance, except our C3 ordinance is a special exception. This is a conditional use. So we're not changing the conditional use procedure. So at this point, unless council has something for me, I'll turn it over to Ryan Wotus, who is the attorney for Sheets.
And Bruce, a C3 zone district is called highway commercial.
Highway Commercial District, correct.
Good evening. My name is Ryan Wotus. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Goldberg, Kamen, and Garvin, here this evening on behalf of Sheets and RGB Development. As indicated, this text amendment or this request is a little bit more limited in scope in terms of what we have presented for council's consideration this evening, and then hopefully to move forward for a public hearing on that item. This does deal solely with the RC district and deals only with one use, the service station use within that district. And for those of you not intimately familiar, I guess, with the RC district, it's a very small district. It's located actually on the southern boundary of the town and Ross Township along Perry Highway. It's a distance of approximately 0.7 miles, so 0.7 of a mile along Perry. And I think all but one parcel that's located in the RC or currently zoned in the RC district is located directly on Perry Highway. So what we're looking for, or what the request is with respect to the location of a service station within that RC district. Your ordinance currently provides certain parameters as a conditional use that this use would be approved, one of which is that it has a spacing requirement requiring a distance of 1,500 feet between an existing service station and a rebuild or a new proposed service station. What we have presented so far, and it went before Planning Commission, was to modify that language with the addition of 7 more words, basically saying that it needs to be a distance of 1,500 feet except when located at the same intersection. That was taken from the general standards set forth in the zoning ordinance for that use itself. This use is only permitted within the RC district and the C3 district, where in the RC it is a conditional use, in the C3 it's a special exception. But that is basically the standard generally for this use in the town, is that it needs to be 1,500 feet or the same intersection. So what we're trying to do is have some consistency in the ordinance and add that additional language in the RC district with respect to the conditional use as one of the criteria for the conditional use approval. Before the Planning Commission, as Bruce had indicated, they had requested an additional clarification that it would only be at a signalized intersection within the RC district rather than just generally the term intersections. They sought to clarify a little bit more where these uses could actually be located adjacent to or across the street at one intersection. That's a brief overview of what we're asking for. We do have people here from the development team, also an individual that can speak from a land use perspective and traffic perspective. But at this point, I guess as this is more of an introduction, I'd open the floor, and we're happy to answer any and all questions you have with respect to the request at this point.
Well, an RC residential commercial district allows gas stations as a conditional use. A conditional use means that if a specific zoning district is subject to certain criteria and approved by council, and council sort of sits like a board of viewers, and I guess by not board of viewers, but zoning hearing board, and I guess we can't really go out and talk to other people about this ex parte. Is that correct, or is that your understanding?
What will happen is council, at the conditional use hearing, the public will be invited to present any testimony. Any interested party will be able to provide evidence and testimony, and council will have to base its decision on that evidence that's received at the public hearing.
Base its decision on making the amendment to the ordinance?
No, for the actual conditional use.
Oh, conditional use.
So the applicant will go on first, and they'll have to present testimony and evidence to show that they meet each one of the criteria.
Right.
Then the public will be able to, anyone else in the public or interested parties will be able to testify if for or against. The council will weigh that evidence that they've received, and if council determines that each one of the criteria is met, council is required to approve the
Right.
development. However, you can add,
A
reasonable
conditional,
conditions.
like lighting or maybe additional buffering or something like that.
Exactly, something like that to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the,
Right.
surrounding properties.
So is this ordinance change going to be voted on at the April meeting?
No, this is gonna be on the same timeline as the one we just discussed. So what will happen is on April 23rd, if council believes this ordinance should move forward, council will vote to go ahead and direct Mr. Betty to submit a copy to the County Planning Commission. A copy will go back to the Town Planning Commission for another discussion. And then a public hearing will be scheduled 45 days out from April 23rd.
So the April 23rd, it just allows it, we just allow it to go to the county.
Yes, on April 23rd, you'll express whether or not you're interested in considering this amendment, or whether you think the majority of folks on council think, no, bad idea, let's kill it, which you'll have the opportunity to do. This is a councilmanic act. You have full discretion as to whether you want to adopt this zoning amendment, just like the other zoning amendments. So you're not obligated to move it forward, but if you, after hearing the reasons why it's being proposed, and if you think it makes sense, majority of council will vote to move it forward and essentially start the official process, the actual formal process to schedule the public hearing and potentially adopt the zoning amendment.
Okay, to adopt, just for clarification, to adopt this change, this 1,500 feet change?
Correct.
Okay,
In this
and
case,
that'll take place in May?
No, because if we vote on April 23rd, we need 45 days.
Oh, 45 days.
Yeah, so the hearing will probably be early June.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And then we'll decide whether or not we can put that 1,500 feet in the ordinance.
Right, I mean, the 1,500 feet is already in the ordinance. You're deciding whether or not you're gonna carve out an exception for if they're at the same signalized intersection.
Right. So, I mean, what I'm concerned about is that we passed this ordinance, passed this change, and none of the neighbors have, I haven't heard from any neighbor at all. None of the neighbors are gonna get a chance to speak for or against it. And so you'll say that will happen?
Well, actually, they'll have two opportunities if they really want to be involved. Number
Yeah,
one.
but I'm thinking that after the first opportunity, if they don't make a move, then the second opportunity is almost automatic. In other words, we just can put additional requirements like lighting or maybe a buffer or something like that.
Yeah, you're basically correct. Yeah, I mean, if they establish, the applicant establishes that they meet the criteria,
Right.
you would have to approve it. You couldn't say, well, we think this is a bad use in that particular spot, even though they meet the criteria, or we're gonna turn it down. You wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
You're right, you'd just be able to add additional conditions.
But in the meantime, the public will have a chance to voice at a meeting.
So the public will have an opportunity both at the public hearing on the zoning amendment, that would be their first crack at it, and that's what I think you're suggesting would be the most logical place for them to express any concerns
Right.
they might have, because once it's adopted by council, it becomes the new criteria, and if the applicant meets that criteria, then there's only so much that someone who is testifying at that second public hearing for the conditional use
Right.
would be able to do.
Yeah, well, my other concern is what type of notice do these neighbors get? What type of notice do they, other than the website and it's on our website? Did you guys send out a special a mailing to each of them?
Your solicitor could speak to, I mean, it's gonna be what's required under the municipality's planning code.
Right, so there's public notice, which is newspaper publications. And I don't believe there's any special town requirements for zoning amendments as far as notifying nearby properties. Am I correct, Mr. Reddy?
You're correct, this is not a rezoning, this is zoning amendment.
Right.
Okay.
If it was a
And
rezoning,
while it applies, it's for a specific parcel, it applies to the entire district.
And to just, I guess, to further speak to the councilman's question, is prior to even getting to this point, when Sheets had initially gotten involved and chose a location that they chose to redevelop, as a, service station. They had met with neighbors at that point, had held a town hall meeting with interested parties that lived adjacent to the site to sort of walk through what was being proposed at that point. So there has been some community outreach that occurred probably 4 or 5 months ago or even more initially on this item.
That's good to hear. And were you required by ordinance to do that?
We were not.
Yeah, so why wouldn't you send them a notice as a matter of courtesy, telling them that this is specifically going down on the 23rd?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to speak with my client. My understanding was that they knew this process was still going on as it had been, and we had previously advised them, of the proposed development. So we usually, have that initial outreach, speak with them, let them know about what's happening, and then generally follow, what the MPC would traditionally require from a notice perspective to make sure that we're completely on all fours with the law.
I would like to see you send out another letter telling them that this ordinance is being proposed. This change is being proposed.
Okay, I'm happy to speak with your solicitor. I mean, we can coordinate something that, to the extent the township wants us to have some type of notification.
Now, let me ask you, Gavin, do we have to change the ordinance to allow this 1,500 feet? Since it's a conditional use, couldn't we as council waive that 1,500 foot requirement?
No,
Okay.
no, I mean, the criteria have to be met, with that, where else a variance would have to be obtained by the
Yeah,
applicant.
okay, okay. That's all the questions.
And from that variance standpoint too, when this was originally designed, there was a lot of back and forth between the town and Sheets to ensure that we were not going to need any variances for our development to comply completely with all of the town's requirements. So there had been a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of consideration taking into this development to avoid any type of variance issue or otherwise.
May I ask what, I'm sorry.
I was gonna ask a question, is somebody else talking?
Mr. Walkowskis is.
Go ahead, go ahead. Go.
Should I go or will you?
Yeah.
you talk?
I think Mrs. Powers was
Oh.
asking a
That's
question.
okay, go ahead.
Does this change that we've been discussing here, this amendment, it only affects the specific property and configuration of the properties at that location, or is it a broader application?
Well, if it would affect Paramount, like Paramont's an intersection, someone could put another, two gas stations could be put on Paramount.
That's what I'm asking. Right?
Yeah, that's right. That's why I was trying to see if they could get the conditional use without changing the statute.
In other words, you could end up, it probably, I suspect that it may be commercially odd or not very palatable to the parties, but you could theoretically end up with 4 gas stations, 1,500 feet apart, in close proximity on what is it,
Perry
Yeah.
Highway, yeah. What's would you say 0.7 or 0.9 miles?
It appears that the district itself along Perry Highway is approximately 0.7 miles. And then, so I think that was part of what was brought up from the commission standpoint to ask for that signalized item to be added in there. And I think that at that point, at least one of the members had indicated it appears there's probably only 2 places it could occur. One of which is at our location and another location further down south.
Paramount Road's a signalized location.
But that would still have the potential for 4 gas stations.
Yeah.
Being,
Is that
Right.
1,500 feet from there?
No, it's not 1,500 feet from Sheets, it's current station. Paramount is not 1,500 feet from, but they could put
Right.
two gas stations, one on one side of Paramount and the
But
other.
once one was there, you couldn't, correct?
Pardon me?
Once one was at the Sheets,
Yeah,
you couldn't put
that's-
one 1,500 feet away.
Yeah, that's what this change is all about.
Why do you want this change?
So part of what our prior development that we had worked through with the town, this was requested, this is when this came to light. So currently Sheets is operating along Perry Highway on a parcel that's sort of shaped like a V. It's a very odd, you probably all know that site. So what was being proposed originally was to redevelop that site. But because of the size of that piece, it's almost impossible to put really anything onto that site. So initial discussions were had with the community college to see if they could acquire some pieces to the rear and still redevelop that as an entire redevelopment. that did not necessarily work out. The community college wanted to retain, the use of that for surface parking. So what was being proposed then was to redevelop this store at an adjacent site across the street. As part of that, the existing landowners of the current sheets where we're at, that's actually a ground lease, wanted to ensure that they could retain the rights into the future to utilize that potentially for a gas or service station. So part of this request came from that request from that landowner, basically saying we want to retain our rights to potentially operate a fueling station into the future. So this text amendment then would protect basically their land use rights and also permit us to go ahead and redevelop as we were originally anticipating. So that's where this whole concept came from. But then in further looking at what the ordinance provides, talking with land use experts, all that testimony, the expectation was that testimony would be presented at the public hearing, would talk about how the goal is you want to locate these uses at intersections. You don't, for instance, in this site, if you were 1,500 feet away, you potentially could be mid-block. You don't want fueling stations located there from a traffic perspective and from a land use perspective. So the proposal, again, coming from what's already permitted under a separate provision, was to go ahead and create consistency and then also sort of bring it up to date with how you traditionally want these uses to be ultimately developed, which is at intersections.
Any other questions from council?
Mr. Chairman, one for our land use administrator who recommended this signalization language be added. Was that done specifically for safety reasons?
Yes, in discussions with our traffic engineer, Trans Associates, they indicated that it would be unlikely that PennDOT would ever approve a service station of this nature or a gas station of this nature at an unsignalized intersection. So we thought when we were updating the ordinance and we discussed it as if it was a signalized intersection. So yes, for safety reasons, exactly.
Then to Councilman Mertz's point, just for clarity, this exception would allow up to 2 filling stations at a signalized intersection, but the 1,500-foot distance from the next filling station would still exist. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And we have that written in our C3 Highway Commercial District Ordinance currently.
And lastly, my last question, Mr. Chairman. Would conditions, appropriate conditions for conditional use be things like other safety-related things like alignment of intersections or enhanced signalization or limited turning out of the station or into the station?
This has been examined by our traffic engineer and PennDOT in great depth. And although they haven't approved, they being PennDOT has to approve this, and we have to follow all the PennDOT regulations in order to do this. There has been a realignment proposed, different timings on the traffic signal, an additional turning lane, and extension of a turning lane. I can't remember what else, a number of change of the driveways. There have been a number of changes that are going to be required at this intersection.
So to my point, those would be the type of appropriate conditions related to safety?
Yes. Okay. Those will be addressed before, if this goes on, those will be addressed before it gets to town council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, I do have a question. You said you had a previous meeting,
Yes.
right? Were there any of the people from Montclair at that meeting?
There were. I don't know if we have a list of exactly the names. We could even provide that to you if you'd like us to.
May I ask what kind of a response you got?
So, I think, I don't know if somebody I was not present at that meeting at the time, but I think that my understanding is there was just concerns raised about lighting and maybe some sound, and we had shown what was being proposed, basically a rendering, because there's significant thought has basically gone into the development along Montclair into the rear there. First, your ordinance provides or requires 100 feet of buffering. So we provided all of that to really move the use considerably from those homes. And then also there's been significant vegetation and landscaping put back there again to do the same thing, and looked at shielding, lighting, all of that to make sure that really we are being very cautious of residential neighbors to not impact them in any way that really would be detrimental to their use. So
That would be my concern.
and as part of the further presentation, once if it would get to the development phase, there has been renderings done that can actually show the timing. You know, you could look at the site in the middle of the day, see what it looks like, look at it at night, see what the lighting would look like, so that you guys would be able to have, if the conditional use approval came before you, could really get a full grasp of really what you'd be looking at if this were developed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If we did not approve this, then the new sheets could not go in, or the original owners could not retain their privileges to have a station there.
That's potentially up for a legal discussion, but the position potentially that is out there is that this redevelopment could not occur with the existing use being there. However, it's, you know, your solicitor, that's a longer discussion and maybe a 3-page memo to explain really what the legal rights are there. But again, we were trying to go ahead and address concerns at the forefront raised by our existing landlords.
Well, we just need to know what the results would be if we don't approve this.
Yeah, and it's difficult to say, to be honest with you. As Mr. Wood has said, I mean, there will be legal arguments on both sides as to whether, you know, there's issues such as abandonment of use, or it's fairly complex legally. But the short answer is it could be challenging for Sheets to develop a new site without this amendment. With the amendment, it certainly, while it still could always be challenged by, you know, another property owner, another interested party, it's sets them up more likely for success to be able to build on the new site.
Council, could you elaborate a little bit more on that? It just seemed to me that the proponent of the change, namely the news station across the way, would be requesting a change from a current status quo in the triangular shaped piece of land. How would that people, the owners of that, be disadvantaged by somebody coming in and suggesting change? I would have thought that the status quo would just remain in the event of the extreme, apropos to Council President's question.
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to dig too deep into the merits, the potential merits of an application that may come before you until we actually have a hearing, until there's evidence presented.
Somebody can always make arguments, but that would be what it would be. It would be arguments.
Right.
I understand your reluctance to opine on it now, but I just want to make sure that we understand the dynamics, at least in general.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a kind of a complex matter. It would depend on essentially how it was presented to council, and, you know, a lot of it would be based on legal arguments made by any objectors and the applicant.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Steve?
I just wanted to ask again, I understood at the last discussion on this, that the residents of Montclair were going to be able to get into Sheets parking lot to actually use that signal to their benefit?
Correct.
Okay.
Because there had been some concerns that they had raised, trying to come up to Montclair and make the left is obviously very difficult for those residents. So there would be access to a signalized light on Perry Highway from Montclair. They would be able to cross over our site, hit an access point that'll be signalized, and then we'll actually have signalized access left instead of, you know, sort of gunning it.
So, Mr. Rob, what we're saying essentially is, if anyone wants to talk about either the hospital or Sheets, they should come on the 23rd.
Correct. Well, I mean, technically, the discussion will be, you know, on the zoning amendments themselves. But
Right.
the practical effect of those zoning amendments will affect the ability to construct
Right.
both of these developments. And then, you know, again, keep in mind, though, that is basically the first step in kind of whether you're going to move it forward or not. There will be a more formal opportunity for testimony by the public at the public hearing that would happen in late May, early June.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but councilmen can't contact these people, can they? I mean, it's an I thought.
Well, this meeting's a matter of public record. So.
Yeah, but the meeting, this isn't an ex parte meeting. This is contacting a neighbor of Montclair seem to be a ex parte communication.
Keep in mind that there's, two processes here. The conditional use application, which would, where council sits in a quasi judicial
Right.
position, and the zoning amendment, where council really has discretion to make a determination as to whatever they think is best for the town. So that, there would be no problem with discussing with constituents
Okay.
their feelings on a proposed zoning amendment. Ideally, they would come before, council and
Right.
provide public comment, and you get input that way. That's the ideal situation. I think Mr. Wotus had potentially, he was gonna speak to his client about potentially, providing even further notice, and
Right,
he's
yeah.
legally obligated to do. So between those two things, and I imagine this is the kind of thing that goes on the town website as well.
Yeah.
The agenda is posted, so, I think the word should get out, there's various steps, right? You have you have the April 23rd meeting, and you have a public hearing. I mean, there'll be plenty of opportunities for the public to provide input on this.
And the public hearing is before we pass this amendment?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions?
We also have, our custom has been, when a public hearing is held, the council sits as zoning committee 2 to 3 weeks later and reviews the public hearing, and that's another opportunity for the public to comment.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anything else? Anyone in the audience? Is anyone here from Montclair? No one here from Montclair. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is a notification that a letter of resignation of a member of the Uniform Construction Code, International Fire Code, and Property Maintenance Code Appeals Board has been received from Lamar Oliver. Lamar is moving to DeRidder, Louisiana, and he's giving up this position. Lamar was also a member of the zoning hearing board and and town council. Okay. Any
So,
comments?
with council's permission, then, we would begin the process, a 30-day process of receiving applicants. We could post that tomorrow on our website.
Okay, yeah.
Good with me.
So there's an alternate to the personnel uniform construction code, correct?
There's enough people to staff it right now.
Okay, does the alternate move up into the position and then we post for the alternate?
The protocol the council has established is to interview, and if the alternate wants to move up, the alternate would apply.
So the alternate doesn't automatically
No,
move into that
that
position?
has not been automatic.
So we would have to re-interview him?
Whoever
He or
wants to
she.
be a full member of the board, according to our policy, would apply to sit on the board.
Most places do not have a formal policy as formal as yours as far as appointments. So it's more of council discretion with just a vote.
Okay.
Any public comment? The zoning committee meeting hereby adjourned.
I'd like to call to order the Public Safety Committee meeting. First, we have the chief's report.
Good evening. I'll give a brief summarization. We had a very busy month with over 1,000 calls, many of those being service calls. We continue to try to move, and I'll actually try to cover a little bit of number 4 in the agenda here relative to the school resource program. We're working currently with the school district, the town manager, myself, preparing the necessary agreements, and I will be creating policies and procedures, and we will begin a criteria for selection for the school resource officers. I think it's an exciting time for the department as we continue to establish new and innovative programs. But the school resource officer will be a police officer that'll be in the schools. We're looking at this as is still in the planning stages. We had a meeting with the North Allegheny school officials and some school board members. They seem to be very much in favor of the program. I, since coming back, believe in the program. I think it pays great dividends. not only for the safety and welfare of the students, but for the overall rapport and respect that an officer can build with a police officer. I want to talk about, too, that we have been doing very well in the area of some narcotics investigation, which I have an extensive background in and have brought some experience involving officers participating in our local task force that gives us a vehicle to do drug investigations. We've been doing very, very well, and we just we're involved, which I'll report on next meeting, a significant drug arrest here in the town on Friday. We continue to look outside of the box, and we continue to be energetic in the way we serve our community. That doesn't happen, and I want to thank Council. It's my sincere gratefulness for being supportive to new ideas and new initiatives as we move forward. I enjoy working with each and every one of them, and I believe that the police department continues to do things and be innovative in our programs towards the future to benefit the safety of the community. Respectfully, Madam Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you.
With respect to the cost aspects of maintaining an officer, is it how many hours a day would the officer be spending there, number one?
Councilman McKim, what we're doing is we're breaking down the specifics of that through data. The time that the actual officer will be detailed to the school, and with that ratio, we're going to talk it over with the school district to negotiate what the ratio will be for the payment of the officers. Historically, the school district pays a percentage of that, and the government entity pays a percentage of that. But we're going to break it down. To answer your question, it's a very good question. It's about 80 to 90% that actually that officer's work will be detailed specifically around functioning as a school resource officer.
My question, Chief, was, let me put it another way. Is it an 8-hour job for the officer?
Yes.
Is it always the same officer, or would you train other officers to do it?
There will be, usually you want to do the same officers because you want consistency and you want the children to know the police officer. You want the staff and administrators in that building to know the police officer, to be able to work with him professionally. So the officer will be the same officer assigned to that school.
Thank you. I just have one
Sure.
other question. Sustaining the cost of having the officer placed there, that officer obviously would be supporting an entity that is responsible for more than just Mccandless, the town of Mccandless. How would that allocation of cost go? In other words, would part of the cost be allocated? Would the school board itself do that part of it and figure out how much is fair from their side?
We have discussed that, and that's a very good point, Councilman. That will be worked out through basically negotiations through the manager and the business agent. But that point has been raised because you're going to have children in a school district that are not from Mccandless but are using that school, so obviously that resource officer. So we're working through logistically all those things, and the questions were all excellent, and that in fact will be taken into consideration, and that appropriately everybody contributes to this officer.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I had to take a break for a moment. Chief, did you mention that the two schools that have been identified are the North Allegheny High School and North Allegheny Intermediate? You did. Okay.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yeah.
Will those officers come back to us in the summer when the children don't have school?
They will, but there's training, there's logistical planning that they have to do for the year to prepare for the educational programs they're due. So we're working on that ratio. So we lose them. As I said, looking at what I'm breaking down, about 90% of the time. It is a commitment, but a commitment that we feel pays dividends, because when I broke down the data of the time that we were spending at those schools, we were spending a considerable amount of time there. So now we will have an officer there in the school conducting these investigations, doing the programs and that. So it'll be more consistent, and I do believe that it'll be a good program.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
A comment, thank you for your good work on dealing with the speeding issue on Perry Highway.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Public?
Oh, public questions?
They're taking it.
No, it's in, I just had,
Comments are taken.
I sort of messed it up.
That's okay.
Come up and identify yourself, please. But you're supposed to take comment at the end of it.
Right here.
Hi, Council. I'm Aaron Sapp. I live at 351 Highview Street, new member to Mccandless community. Chief, my question for you is, for the school resource officer, is he going to be trained with your Northern Regional SWAT teams and specialized active shooter training? Obviously, that's a hot ticket item in today's society.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially because he's in the school.
Right.
So those skills, first of all my officers go through active shooter training relative to schools, relative to businesses, but especially there'll be enhancement on the part of that officer in their special duties.
Who does their training, if you're at liberty to say that?
We have various agencies who train.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. That was my question.
Okay, so next, we are gonna review the request to create no parking zone on the last 200 feet of Highview Street. Toby, would you like to update us on that?
Sure. Back in October, council repealed the no parking zone on, it was actually overlapping no parking zones. Repealed the no parking zone on both sides of Highview for its entire length. We did that back in October.
Yeah, I remember it.
Since then, we've received an detailed email from Mr. Kotlinski, David Kotlinski at 352 Highview, who's asking that, to some extent at least, that the no parking signs be reinstated. We have received information from a couple of other residents. I've got an email from a Brian D'Antonio from 364 Highview, who asks that the signs remain down. And I think, Mr. Sapp, did you comment, I believe, to staff about that as well?
I did call, yes, sir.
Thank you. And if we could ask you if you wanted to comment at some point here. I'll just finish my briefing. Talk to the chief about this potential for reinstatement of the no parking zone or some portion of it. Talk to Public Works. Our Public Works Superintendent, Mark Sabina, is with us here tonight. In these discussions, it seems like what we really have to be able to do is allow emergency vehicles, Public Works plows, and equipment to be able to pass on the street. And it appears that the most serious point of conflict would be at the end of the street along Mr. Kotlinski's, he had to have a T in there, didn't he? Kotlinski's frontage. So Mark Sabina came up with the idea to me this afternoon that rather than reimpose the 200-foot rule at the end of the street for no parking, at least during the winter time, is to simply place it across the area that Mr. Kotlinski is trying to protect, which is his frontage, which is approximately 70 feet. And if council would be so inclined, we could entertain that as a kind of a compromise, a small version, and still allow parking on the rest of the street. Now, Mr. Kotlinski told us he couldn't be here tonight. I don't know if he would be in favor of this suggestion, but so that's the suggestion that the administration is making. We are getting some permission from the neighbor across from Mr. Kotlinski. Would that be you?
That is me, but that's the first I've heard of it, sir.
Okay. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit, because Mark Sabina is here. We can, if I could ask you to join in the conversation, if you have, I'll finish my report. Is that all right, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. So I actually am directly across the street from 352. I've never met my neighbor. I've attempted to on multiple occasions. I don't have any issue or see any problem with a no parking being in front of his residence. I do, however, have an issue with it being in front of mine. I'm not really sure why it would be necessary to even have it in front of his. I haven't seen it. I've been there all winter, an issue with anybody turning around at the bottom of the street. There's additional paved part of the street down there, which is, to my understanding, due to the fact that he complained in the past about people backing up in his driveway or something along that lines, which I also haven't seen. But I hold no issue with no parking in front of his residence if that's what he prefers or would be agreeable to, but I would like to ask to not have no parking signs in front of my residence.
Mark Spina, could you ask if you could join in the conversation, please, on behalf of the staff, and explain why the 70 feet seems to make sense?
May I just interject before Mark starts? That's in my ward, and Mr. Kotlinski, I'm saying it correctly, he has called me several times, and his issue with wanting the no parking there, it's a narrow street.
It's no more narrow than every street in our neighborhood.
Right.
One at a time.
Right. But he doesn't want anyone to park in front of his home when other people are having guests.
Okay, can I speak to that as well?
Sure.
So I'll give you a little bit of background of who I am. I'm actually a police officer for the city of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
The only issue he would ever have with getting out of his driveway, if that was his concern, is the fact that he has cordoned off majority of his driveway because he doesn't want plow trucks to be able to or garbage trucks to back up in his
That's why
driveway.
I was there.
I'm not sure what the gentleman's issue is. I have a special needs child, and my wife and I take care of my mother-in-law who's stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She lives with us. So once a week, we have somebody that parks in front of our house, and that is the only time that anybody is even on the street at our residence. I would love to have a conversation with the gentleman about it if he had an issue getting out, but he has decided that, I guess, all of our time needs to be here when he obviously couldn't show up for it. So it's like a continual issue, and it's not just with me, with other neighbors on the street. We all signed to have it removed, and it's just like a grudge match at this point.
Well, Mark and I were both there at his home, so we're aware.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead, Mark,
I
I'm
don't know
sorry.
what else other than to say that. I would love to have an adult conversation with him, but he's not open to that.
Thank
so.
you. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to let him know some background.
What would you like me to talk about? I mean,
Well, you know-
Aaron has voiced pretty well. I have looked at it, and the street is as wide as pretty much any other street in the town. It is a dead end. It's difficult to turn a truck around at the end of the street. The folks that were in the house before you folks moved in allowed us to use a good bit of the driveway to turn the trucks around in.
no issue with that
And
you guys have a job to do just like anybody else.
Sure. And you've seen the guys down there probably. It's very difficult to turn a truck around because there's just no room. By prohibiting parking in front of Mr. Kotlinski's, we can still, as long as Aaron has no problem with us using his driveway, we can get the truck in there and swing around. Even if he has somebody parked in front of his house, it probably won't prohibit us or give us any problems.
So, we want to say you can park on the whole street, but not in front of this house?
Correct.
That's what he
Because
wants.
it's at a dead end.
It's a dead end.
Customarily, you wouldn't identify one lot. This is a unique, attempt at a unique solution, but
Is
he's
that-
got the last 70 feet. That 70 feet would give our public works drivers, an extension of the front of their truck. How far does the plow extend, 4 or 5 feet? at
With the
least?
plow on the truck, they're about 30 feet long,
So
plus or
It
minus.
gives them swing room, because we've had complaints from Mr. Kotlinski that your plow nicked my yard when it swung there, so.
There's no yard there.
Well, I'm just,
He claims that's why he put those stones there.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Has anyone ever parked in that specific area that has stopped plow trucks from being able to turn around?
Not that I know of.
So then we would just be continuing to waste resources on one gentleman's complaints.
So we're pretty much saying no parking in front of your neighbor's house,
Correct.
right?
the last
Across
70
from my
feet.
house.
I'm feeling a little concerned about the precedence that this would set on any street. because if people start no parking in front of my house, but parking in front of my house, but not in my house, I'm a little
And then the people who don't want
concerned.
parking in front of their house, their guests actually park in front of the people.
Yeah.
who
So
are willing
I'm
to
a little-
allow.
I'm a little concerned about
Me too.
that.
So I know there's complaints on the street behind my neighborhood, the same thing, so I'm like, oh my gosh, how can we do this?
I have a similar complaint twice in mine. So,
So, I mean, so as long as they're able to back up into your driveway for the trucks, then we should be fine, we wouldn't have to do this, right? And put a no parking.
Correct.
There's been no concern of mine. I mean,
As long as he's got no problem with us using his driveway as a turnaround. The folks that were there before, the only thing that I requested was that she move the mailbox, because with the placement of the mailbox, it was very difficult to try to swing in there.
is it good where it is now? She already moved it?
I haven't looked at it. I'd have to come back over and look at it
You
again.
can knock on my door if you want, that's fine. If it's an issue.
You're the man.
I mean, I know I'm young, but when I grew up, like, if you had an issue with your neighbor, you went over and said, hey, can we resolve this? We didn't have to have a city council meeting about it.
My husband and I have been there for 30 years this year, and there were never any no parking signs on the street.
Would you like to
People
come up
identify,
if you,
yeah.
And you can use.
You can use the
use
center
that one right
microphone.
there.
Whichever you'd like.
We've been there for 30 years. My husband bought the house in '87, we got married in '89. Never was there a no parking sign on our street. Melinda Harold, I live at 379 Highview Street. Until they resurfaced the road, which was this past summer, and I guess there was an ordinance at that point, that's when we came in, it was October 2nd's meeting, that we were here and did this. David Kotlinski, we asked him to sign it then. He didn't show up at that meeting either. So Dave's thing is, he's not trying to convenience himself, he's trying to inconvenience our neighborhood.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
so how far is your house, how far apart are your homes from his?
There's only 3 houses on our side of the street, and there's 8 on the other.
There really aren't that many houses on the street, are there?
There's 11.
And we have block parties, we have fun, and Dave's never been there.
It's just kind of.
And we invited him.
Like, honestly, it is just like it's like a grudge at this point. And
We've tried.
I mean, at this point,
Your pleasure, if you would like to have us advertise for any kind of no parking zone. Otherwise, we'll get back to Mr. Kotlinski and tell him that we're not going to do that.
would we all, is everyone okay with that if we just get back to him and say?
I would recommend going back to him and saying, this seems a little bit unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, we've had several meetings, obviously, and I guess he hasn't been here, so at this point, all the other neighbors have shown up.
And we took the no parking signs down for a reason, so,
Okay, well, let's do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
okay.
Geez, anything else?
Thank you for coming to the meeting. We appreciate it.
We're excited about the sheets thing. We learn a lot when we come.
Okay, any public comment at this time? Oh, I'm sorry, that's the public safety meeting.
Adjourn. She have to adjourn.
She just
Oh,
She
she
just
did, I'm
did.
sorry, I
Yep.
didn't hear.
Services?
I'd like to call the Services Committee meeting to order at this time and ask for Fire Marshal's report for the month of February 2018 and the permit report for March of 2018.
Thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. February was a fairly moderate month. We only ran a total of 47 calls. Out of those 47, there really wasn't much to comment on. The fire departments continue our extensive training since January. We have a number of our members conducting and actually just recently finished their vehicle rescue training. Members of council on March 27th had attended the PEMA emergency management class here at Town Hall. Also just another extension of an invite, and just to be aware that on April 24th and May 1st, the fire departments are going to have their annual SCBA qualifications, and if anybody's interested in attending, I would actually to please do so. Public relations, on February 5th, myself, Chief DeSanti, and Detective Egley presented emergency preparedness and workplace violence at the Pediatric Alliance offices, as well as Detective Egley and myself did the active shooter preparedness at LaRoche College. And also another date to be of interest, on April 26th, this is the second year in a row, we were doing the North Allegheny Senior High School, the mock crash up at the high school. This is the Thursday prior to prom. So this is the second year we'll be able to do that, which is a huge success on their part. Again, if there's any questions or comments, please let me know. If not, I'll take any now.
Our comments from the board, questions? Fire Marshal Stack, on behalf of Councilwoman Schweiger and myself, I want to thank you for the great tour you provided last week.
Thank you very much for coming.
I did have two quick questions on the report. I noticed a couple of unpaid fees for false alarms that haven't been paid, and I was just wondering how collection of those unpaid fees are handled.
Referring to this month, or just in general?
Actually, there was one from 2017.
I think everything is caught up since then. I didn't print that one, but I think we are caught up as
Okay,
of.
we are caught up.
Yeah, as
Great.
of March, right. It may not reflect in this report because we are one month behind. Yeah.
Okay, and then the other question was, what's the disposition of those fines as far as what happens to those dollars? I think it was $1,700 has been collected.
Sure, they go into the apparatus sinking fund, which is for the replacement. We were talking about it briefly on our tour, but the apparatus, each fire company has a total of 2 major pieces of apparatus eligible in the fund, and that helps fund the purchase of up to 50% of the purchase of an apparatus.
Right, we loan
As a
out
down
50.
payment.
It's a revolving loan fund, so that helps buttress the base that we have each year. We range $5,000 to $8,000 in collections for fines, and all that goes toward beefing up the funds so that there's enough there when it's called upon to help fund half of the cost of the fire apparatus.
Great. Are there any, I think that, are there any public comment on fire
How
marshal
much public
report?
left? I
Okay.
scared them away.
Yeah. Item 3, notification of a proclamation is being prepared to recognize the Northland Public Library's 50th anniversary. Is there any comment from council? Any comment from the public? Hearing no further comment, then I adjourn the Services Committee meeting.
Madam President, I'd like to call to order the Public Works Committee meeting.
Good evening, again. You have the activity report for March. It's fairly brief. We had a lot of rain and snow through the month of March. As noted on my report, 16 out of the 21 work days in March, we had either rain or snow. So a lot of outdoor activities have not been completed that we tended to work on. We did get some work done over in Wall Park here, constructing a new wall behind the backstop and preparing to do dugouts and new pads for the bleachers. Again, all of which has been delayed because of all the water. Snow and ice control report that you have separately, and the drainage work continues on Sloop Road, what we've called Phase 2. We're nearing completion probably in the next couple of weeks. El Grande Paving, as you may recall, held the second half of Sloop Road off from last year, and they're going to do that paving as a startup this year to get that out of the way. It will be part of last year's paving program and not part of this year's. And that's about all I have, really.
May I make a comment? I just wanted to let you know, Mark, that I had several neighbors that stopped at my house to let me know how delighted they were that we're working on the drainage down there on Slip Road, where you are now.
Good.
So,
Good. That's good to hear. It's been an inconvenience for some, but we're trying to work with it.
you know,
I've had multiple questions or calls this month and the past month about the head-in parking on certain roads, in particular one North Florence, but what are the rules and regulations for that as far as, because we had discussed no head-in parking at all during the snow months. And apparently it was not looked at all by any officers during the
I
time.
can't answer that. You'd You'd have to direct that question to the chief.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with anything you know as far as
No.
adding parking on certain roads and no certain
No.
roads? Okay. Any other questions on council? Any questions from the audience?
Ted isn't here?
Yeah. You know, Clint Eastwood talked to chairs, I can talk to chairs too.
A lot of conversations out there.
Then I guess I'm going to close the,
No, you gotta do the bid.
No nice.
oh, I'm sorry,
Bid.
snow and ice report.
He did that.
He did that.
Yeah, so review
do
bid
the bid.
tabulation on 2018 paving program.
Bids were opened last Wednesday at 10 a.m. Unfortunately, I was off. I was a little under the weather at the time, but we had six responses to our bid request. I believe we sent out a dozen packets. Youngblood Paving from up around Wampum was the low bidder. They've worked for us before, pretty good company to work with. They've been around for a while and have worked here several times over the last many years. With that, I would suggest that we go ahead and award to them the end of the month. They are, in fact, I got a call today asking me when we might be ready to have them start to come in. And as I addressed the fact of all the rain and everything with them, they told me that they're actually quite far behind with getting started this year too. So they were hoping that I didn't want them to move in time soon. So we're
6
pretty-
responses, is that good?
Yeah, it's about average.
Is it? I thought we had less than
Yeah,
that usually.
it's about average. I think last year we may have had 7 or 8.
Okay.
But it's usually in that, if we send out 12 packets, we usually get 6 or 7 bids back.
Mr. Chairman, in my brief memo, especially in Mark's absence, I point out that the concrete curb was bid as an optional item. It came in at a reasonable per foot cost, however, the amount of feet that would have to be replaced on Glacier Drive would be $136,260. So already included in the base bid price is wedge curb that would be put up against the concrete curb. The width of the road, it's been determined that it's plenty wide to be able to do that. It's 12 cents a foot to do the wedge curb. So the bid is based upon, the bid award is based on base bid plus optional items, but it doesn't seem feasible to, really reasonable to replace the concrete curb. I don't think we should do that.
I haven't looked at it, but.
So,
I agree,
it's a lot of
town
money.
manager, because that's over our budget.
I would take us
And
over
if we-
budget.
And if we remove those things, does that get us back in budget or under budget?
Well, when, and Mark certainly is well equipped to answer, just in brief. The base bid is $1,721,786. And there's 2 items that are out of the optional items that Mark and I have talked about today that are worthy of us putting into effect. This is a bit of an unusual year. A lot of our roads are collector roads and they require striping. So the striping items under the optional bid, those prices are, the term decent price is sort of street talk, but they're pretty good prices. So when you add the thermoplastic line striping, item 7 under option and 9, that still only takes us to $1,844,974. We budgeted $2 million. So Mark has items in here that are flex items, such as excavation, limestone, and textile fabric, base course, most of the rest of those items that he may or may not need. It's going to depend on once a road is milled, actually we see the base, that it may require some base repair. He has looked at these roads carefully. We've had robotics look at these roads carefully based on their the cracking and the way the roads have alligator is the term when cracks spread. The robotics agrees with his long experienced eye. So we're probably going to be under at the end of when all is said and done by this year, under the $2 million we budgeted, which is pretty good since the asphalt prices have gone up. So all in all, we're in pretty good shape. That's why I did recommend that we have to award on this basis, but that we not install the concrete curb. Now, Mark, one other question you and I have not talked about since we got this pricing, since you were sick last week, is the concrete mountable island.
That's what I was gonna say.
Now, we talked about it briefly when you put the specs together. Give us a minute on that, because council, just so council knows, going into the award, what you think we might want to do with that.
The mountable islands that are in for replacement are at the intersection of Ingomar and Blazer. The two smaller islands there are seriously deteriorated and really need to be replaced. The larger island, it appears okay at this point, but when they mill the road off, we may find that it's deteriorated underneath, and it may need to be replaced also. So that's what the three of those are in there for, in the event that we need to replace all three of them.
Are we not looking into replacing the culverts at that intersection?
Not yet.
In the next couple of years, though.
Well, actually, they continue to wear like iron. They, no earlier than 2021.
But how long, I mean, do these islands last if we repair and replace them?
That's a good point. That's something that, again, Mark and I really haven't had a chance administratively to air out a little more. Ordinarily, we would, but he put that it was very logical for him to get a price for the concrete mountable curbs there, mountable islands. But we may want to think about if it's safe enough. We get a readout, Mark, from our traffic engineer to see if we'd use paint instead. And then if we want to have concrete put it in at a later date.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put it in if we're going to be tearing it out in 3 years.
Well, again, that's the earliest, and these culverts are wearing so much better than the other two crossings that we have at Pine Creek. It's crazy, but it's good. It's good news.
No.
Do you think you'll be able to keep it under the budget?
We can try. One thing that, just so you're aware of it, and I had thought about this after I left today when Toby and I had talked about the asphalt wedge curb. It is 12 cents per foot for the actual labor to put it in. That 12 cents doesn't cover the material.
But that's part of the, in essence, that's part of the tonnage on the road.
No, that's not figured into the road right now.
Where is it then?
The tonnage, remember that the intent was to replace the curb so that if the road is now 28 feet wide, that was a flat surface, 28 feet with the tonnage. If we put the wedge curb in, it takes additional asphalt. I haven't taken the time to try to calculate that amount, but there will be some additional asphalt if we go wedge curb. It should still be under budget, but just so you're aware that the tonnage that's on there for binder does not include curb. But we could look at, as far as the islands, the longer island, I think would be fine to wait until we mill it off and see what shape it's in underneath. I mean, the two smaller ones are obviously deteriorated. There's no question about the fact that they're falling apart.
So that, even if you take out 11 and 12 and leave everything else in, then we're still over budget, though, right?
Well, the optional items, unless Mark has some additional information that I'm not aware of, additional items that are, the optional items that are listed there.
But you said you wanted to keep 7 and 9
Yeah,
and
there was.
8.
The optional items that we would have to use are the line striping,
Okay.
the temporary line striping, and the pavement markings.
Okay.
Those have to go down.
They have to
We
go
can't do away with that.
Okay.
Now, having said that, the rest of those items in there, we may not need all of them, we may not need any of it, or if we run into a road that's in really bad condition, once we get through the asphalt and the base is in really horrible condition, it could require more of base repair, excavation and base repair. I mean, I've looked at the roads as best as I can, made the best judgment call that I can as far as how much base repair we're gonna need to do on the roads. That's where those numbers came from.
Mark, back to the asphalt, the amount of asphalt for the wedge curb, since you're saying that the 12 cents, which is interestingly low price, but it's probably a matter of how sometimes bidders weight their bids and shift their actual prices on things. But the tonnage for wedge curve, a foot of wedge curve along the sides of Glacier Drive, I'd like to have a number on that. It doesn't seem like it'd be a really huge number. I'm sure council would like to see what that number might be
I'll try to work something up.
that you're gonna consume. So, I mean, you got the length of the road, plus a foot on each side of wedge curve. Thanks.
The other question that I had too is, of course, there's always a possibility of something developing on Blazer Drive and a lot of construction and things going in there. If we put a brand new road in there and then there's a lot of construction there and they're coming up, and I travel that road every day, so I know that road is bad and I know it needs to be replaced, but I hate the thought of us replacing it and then it getting all torn up again. So my question is, are the people who perhaps develop that property, would they be responsible for that road? Should we wait on that road a little while longer? Of course, that would mean we waited like the last 10 years.
We laid it a long time.
Just something I was thinking about,
Yeah.
you know.
Probably the only other way to do it would be to have the developer post a bond for the road. And if they caused any damage to the road, they would be responsible to repair it.
Okay, and that's kind of a common thing that you can do, and that's acceptable to, okay. I
Glacier-
just didn't want to put a new road in and get it all dug up.
Glacier
Believe me,
Drive
I
was
don't either.
scheduled, when was the last time Glacier Drive was paved was 95,
96.
22 years.
Well, it needs it, I tell you. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'd love to wait a little bit longer to see if somebody can develop.
I know.
It's a mess. We wait much longer, it's gonna be a lot more,
I know.
be destroyed.
Public Works.
Any other questions from town council? Audience? Close public comment, or? It's
right
still
now.
doing it now. Sometime after now.
I guess
I'll close the Public Works Committee.
Call to order the Finance Committee. Everyone has the checklist number 2 for March through April 4th, totaling $835,000. Are there any questions about the bills? No? Everybody's good with anything? We got a lot of money that we spent on the heating and air repairs. Is it fixed? Do we need a new one? Is that something we gotta be looking at here pretty soon, or what did we spend?
What's the,
We had several repairs of the HVAC, I noticed.
Right, that's what I'm talking about. So is it fixed for good? Do we need to start looking
For
about
good.
another one? That's $5,000, $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 in repairs last month.
which number? Yeah.
That's 3 numbers.
There are 3 of them.
10,807, 10,742, 10,725. I just wondered what our HVAC unit was like. Is it getting to the point where we're gonna be fixing? It's time to think about a new one?
Well, this is mostly the boiler. Okay, $829 under 807.
And 742 is $2,475. I mean, I know what it is, but my question is, we need to start thinking of, is it time to think about a new one? Now, like you get a car and it starts getting a lot of repairs. Where are we on that?
And I'm thinking about it because of what's going on at the library.
No, it's not that kind of situation, I hope, that's for sure. But it's, what it is that, okay, the HVAC, these are different systems, that's why I'm glad thank you for pointing out the numbers. I'll do my best without reach here, but Black Knight, put this is an addition to provide additional ventilation in this police department. When they moved into the squad room down further, they needed more ventilation in there, so that's not it's listed as a repair.
Yeah.
That probably should be installation.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
all
so
right.
I think that's a
that's
misnomer.
You
How
see,
about-
I'm trying to keep up.
Well, I appreciate it because I want to, let's see what the third, what was that third one?
725.
725. Because after I check this third one, then I should be able to comment on
It's $5,000
Yeah, 5,000.
for Reno Brothers. multiple invoices.
Yeah, 5,600.
Sorry. It's okay.
Page 2 on
Move
the
the
bottom.
papers around here. Okay, I'm gonna check on that bill. Now, apparently it's been authorized for payment. And that may be excessive. If it is, then I'll be talking to the solicitor about it. I'll be very frank. That's the way I'm gonna respond to your question. Because we have had numerous calls to repair our boiler, and many times.
1, 2, 3,
the
4,
boiler's
5.
fixed and it's
4 or 5
not fixed.
invoices.
Mhm.
And I don't know if this could lead to a legal matter or not, but if the assistant manager has approved this, I will talk to him. He's not here for me to talk to.
Okay.
And I didn't, I was away Friday, I didn't see the final list, so.
That's okay.
I think I have some questions too, ma'am.
And there are
All
five,
right.
5 invoices on that one.
I see that. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
Is it, like, just so I understand, is the boiler old?
That's why I'm asking.
No, I can't remember the exact number of years,
Okay.
but very brief comment, we had a boiler that lasted 50-some years.
They last a long time.
Yeah, they used to do a lot better than
The
today,
old
though.
ones lasted a long, and we got this
I know.
new,
I threw out my 50-year-old
Yeah.
furnace and still wonder if that was a good choice.
only reason we got rid of the old one was it cracked, because that thing was just kept on ticking. And then we got one of these new fancy boilers with all this electronic equipment on it.
Yep,
And it's been nothing but heartache.
yep, that's how it is.
So after moving my old washing machine out, I almost knocked my teeth out trying to move the new one in because it just lifted up like air.
Okay, so, all right, so you're gonna check on that. Now, I wanna know what the heck kind of typewriter we have that takes $900 to maintain it.
Number.
10-826.
Marie, what'd you do to your typewriter?
Does nobody even has a typewriter anymore.
Well, you have to have one of these
26.
forms we have to have at least one.
Typewriter maintenance.
Typewriter maintenance? She
8 of
should've got a
8,
new
6 of 8,
typewriter.
6 of 8 in the general fund.
I don't-
Almost at the bottom, 10-826, the large wide white space.
I had to ask about that.
Okay, I got it.
Typewriter and maintenance, yeah.
That is for all the different typewriters, that's the annual maintenance cost for all the typewriters that are still in our various offices. There's one in 401, that's gotta be yours, Marie.
Is this like a real
There's-
typewriter?
Yep.
Do we have to keep those?
Anytime I ask that question, I get frowny faces.
Ask it right now. An $800 bill to maintain something that's been obsolete 50 years ago?
Not-
When was the last
No, there
time
are
you
6
used your
its,
typewriter?
so that's about $125 per it.
Okay.
No, you
It's
have
a
to use it
maintenance-
for all
it's
the
a
ordinances and
maintenance- It's a maintenance
resolutions.
contract, so there's one in the real estate tax office, the 402, I'll ask Reed if we really need the one at 402 is the finance office. There's one that 411 is the fire marshal's office, 414 is zoning, and there's one over at Public Works.
Let's put them in the Heritage Center.
That sounds good to me, but, okay.
What is
check
the
on it.
reason for them though? I mean, obviously,
my
we
purpose.
You
we
can
have
answer
to
that
have
question.
them.
Marie probably can answer that question better than I can. Marie, you're on.
You know what, I inherited it, but, the ordinances and resolutions, I prepare ahead of time, and I have to type in who made the motions after, so that they're prepared for, for signature.
That can
So,
be
and
done on
I
a
use-
computer?
Not to prepare ahead of time, I mean, I would have to have you come in the day after the meeting, to do that. But then the other thing I use it for is, insurances. A lot of the insurance forms, unfortunately, are not electronic yet. So when I'm renewing those, I use that to fill them out. It's a little more professional than handwriting. And then I also do some of the other reports, miscellaneous reports that come into the property tax community. I don't have the opportunity to do it electronically. Of course, I prefer the computer.
Yeah. All right, well, just a thought.
I would have just assumed typewriters was keyboards and printers.
I
And
had to ask.
I never thought it was a real typewriter.
Yeah. Okay, next thing, notification, that a resolution should be scheduled for adoption, to destroy all the old, not all the old records, but the obsolete public records. And this is like, the Pennsylvania Municipal Records Manual, the approval of what you can get rid of. It's like old tax stuff, older than 2010, some old police citations from 2014, and it's something that we standard do just because we just can't keep up with all the paper. In case anyone was doing the math, we'll be getting rid of 10 95-gallon containers of paper. I added them up because I just do. And can you, just for our edification, what are some of the things that we would not get rid of that we keep in perpetuity? Just name a couple.
Any building that is a public building has to be kept in posterity. There are a number of permanent records such as minutes. Some contracts have to be kept for a long time, such as 12 years. Insurance claims have a certain lifespan. It's longer than a couple of years. So there's a variety of items. But Marie, for our office, for example, we have 2 long file cabinet drawers that after 3 years become about 10 inches. Because there's a lot of things we could just get rid of. They're not of administrative value anymore. But the state law does call out a number of items that require permanent retention.
Any other questions?
And is someone picking this up and shredding it, or do we do it here, or how does this?
We bring a company, Iron Mountain, comes in, they park, they line up their carts down below. If anybody on council wants to get rid of any of the papers that you've accumulated, please bring them in, and Reed will take them down, and they'll be dumped into the shredder and whisked away by Iron Mountain.
When is that scheduled to take place again, you know?
Marie, do you know the date that Reed has scheduled, the actual date? It's later this month.
Yeah, it's in April.
It's right after you approve, so you got a couple weeks. Bring your stuff in if you want.
Number 4, notification that the town's independent auditor has filed and the state has received the summary and financial report from 2017. This is the independent auditor with the financial statement. We'll get all of that once that's completed.
Yeah, for the public's clarification, because I know we have a large crowd left, but here tonight, but we do televise our meetings. The public understands that the audit occurs in 2 phases. One is a requirement that the state has on us that we submit to them a closeout audit for our books for the previous fiscal year. It has to be submitted by March 31st. And you have that audit in your packet, and it's on our website. And it's really, as I call it here, a summary. Our very detailed independent audit that we follow under GASB requirements is almost done. We're just waiting for one ingredient, and that's the OPEB, Other Pension Employee or Post-Retirement Employee Benefits. OPEB is a little acronym that was invented about 10, 15 years ago for any kind of benefit that is pension related, and that takes some actuarial science to determine what that is, and then audited by our auditor. So it gets kind of a double look, and that'll be done, we expect, in May. So we're looking at targeting June for presentation of the audit by our auditors to council. That's our full-blown audit.
Comments on that from anyone? Okay. I got, this is not on the agenda, and I apologize, but I got some really interesting information up at ALOM from several financial institutions that had a lot of really good things to say. And I was wondering what council would think about perhaps looking into some of these and seeing how we're doing compared to, things change, banking offers change, and to what you thought about having, I don't know if Reach would do that or if that would be something our town manager would do, but kind of look at some of these banking options and see if we can get a better deal than what we're getting right now.
We quoted out
PNC.
not too long ago, within a year, to PNC. We do it periodically. Reach will get comparisons from other banks, local banks, and see if somebody wants to do better. And PNC always, if they start charging us for some service, and we say, okay, well, it's time to go quote it out. So it's an administrative function, but we quote out regularly,
Okay.
and so we would turn out.
Who did you compare with?
Oh, FNB. Can't remember who else. Reach has talked to several in the past year, and PNC said, okay, well, we'll knock down our price for some of the services and
Okay.
give free. But who do you have there?
These guys say absolutely, absolutely no, I didn't want to give them free press, but they absolutely, no charges for any banking things, they said. I don't know if this is true or not. But there were several places, and I've got to find the rest of my cards, that I thought maybe we could look at to see if we could get a better deal.
Yeah, I talked to the plastic asphalt guy there for quite some time. This isn't the time to talk about it, but when we do our budget next year, we should probably start.
That'd be something to look at. Yeah, that sounds like a real promising environmental thing. Any other comments on Finance Committee?
Seminars?
Oh, sorry. Everybody got your calendars out? The Enhancing Civility and Our Public Service Through Empathy is April the 24th. That's 6:30 to 9:30. That's all council members, all committee members, all boards, all authorities. We are strongly recommending that everyone please attend that. And also the Allegheny County and Western PA Association of Township Commissioners. That is on May 19th, Saturday. That is a dinner, if you're interested in that. And Local Governments Honoring the Past, Shaping the Future. That is June 21st, 22nd, 23rd. That's Skytop, PA. If you want more details, we have some details.
June
on
what?
that. 21st, 2nd, and 3rd, excuse me, and 4th. It's 4 days.
Madam President, what is that for?
It's called Local Government Honoring the Past, Shaping the
It's a state-
Future.
it's the state convention.
PSATC
Oh, well, that's the
annual
summer
conference.
shindig.
Now, the one in May, do we
It's
let
a
Marie know?
conference, it's a shindig, kind of sounds sort of, more like.
Are we letting no, I'm asking you,
Some sort of
are we letting
recreational
Marie
event or
know if we're going to the one in May?
These have been emailed to council.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Those are the only announcements that I have. Okay, Finance Committee is adjourned.
Question about one of the ones you mentioned. Is this paid for by the town, or does we have to cough up $60 for ourselves? Obviously,
The,
you take your spouse or something.
The town covers the cost of the council member, and any guest is the cost of the council member.
So you pay for it, and you get one freebie, so to speak, for
Well,
yourself.
it's not free, the taxpayers are
Well,
paying
I
for
mean,
you to be trained at your dinner.
No, I'm not trying to make a joke. Is that $60 is,
You don't pay it, but if you bring your wife, she does.
that's right. I got you.
Thanks, Steve.
I assumed that was the case, but I just wanted to make sure. She'll probably stay on. Okay?
I'd like to call the Recreation Committee to order. I only have one thing. Mccandless Athletic Association opening day is Saturday, April 21st at 10 a.m. If council members are attending, they should arrive at 9:45.
And that is also the day for the makeup cleanup day.
And that's also,
May the town cleanup day.
right, and it's also the day for the library gala event.
But that's in the evening.
That's in the evening,
It's a
right.
full day
So it'll be a full day.
in the evening.
And we were there last year, remember?
I remember.
Bring your hats along with your name on. Remember? They gave us baseball hats to wear.
And this is their 50th anniversary.
Right, so we should take our hats along. That any comments? I'm sorry. That concludes my recreation meeting.
Need to make a motion to close?
No,
No,
we're done.
it's a committee
We're done.
meeting, we're done.
That's it.
Just because you're in this
We're
room.
Good.
It's in-